Delighted on this episode to be talking with someone who has been prolific in the world of storytelling across media and across forms, from actor to director to writer. Tim Russ, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me on.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying yes. Folks out there will know you for a variety of series, film work, live action work, as well as video game work. Of course, the world of Star Trek being one of those. You've also lent your voice to Elder Scrolls and Batman, The Doom That Came to Gotham, ElfQuest, the podcast, World of Warcraft, and you're a director as well, and have written and directed projects. So delighted to have you here to talk about the creating that you've done.
Thank you. My pleasure, man. My pleasure.
Absolutely. What initially, I'm an English teacher, so I always like to ask this question. What initially led you to visual and verbal storytelling?
Well, I mean, I started out as an actor, so I would have been working either on stage or in front of camera,
Mhm.
participating in projects that were written, obviously, by other people, um, and uh, and so I started out on the performing arts part of that career, and thus, after a certain period of time, I did get interested in working from the director's standpoint and part. I only did some writing on script revisions and things like that. I did write short story format for a while, did about 12 short stories that I wrote and directed with another producer. So I had a hand in writing narrative film stories and concepts on a short form for a little while, and then was also directing feature films and things like that for folks after that period of time, and using. I mean, it was a transition because obviously, if you're working as an actor, you know that canvas of the story, you're just playing. You know, you're part of one color of that canvas and how it's painted. But when you're the director, you have to take the entire canvas, the entire narrative, and translate it from the spoken word or from the written word to the spoken word. And you have to take the descriptions that are written and created by someone in writing and translate them to the screen so that they become visual at that point. So whether it's the emotion of the actor, what the actor is feeling at a particular given time, what their reaction is to other people and what they say or do to them, all of those things have to be translated into the visual, whether it's a setting, whether it's a mood, um, whether it's something that's tense or something that's relaxed. Um, all of those emotional sort of cues have to be translated from what the written word is onto the visual. And sometimes, and often in those transitions, in those interpretations of the word, changes are made to suit the visual or to make the visual more profound, to make it more powerful, to make it more understandable, to make it more believable, to make it more emotionally impactful. So you have to take those things and interpret the written word of English into something that can be felt visually in a visual medium.
Yeah, yeah, very well said. And I love talking about the transitions from one way of creating to another. And I imagine that being on the performing side really informed both the writing and directing as those projects came to be.
Yeah, primarily from a director to actor relationship. So my ability to communicate with the actors was much easier because I've been an actor, so I can speak their language. I know, you know, I can understand where they're coming from. If there's something that they are having difficulty with, we can work through those issues. I can work them a little easier knowing, you know, what it is that they're feeling. I have an idea of what they're feeling. I have an idea of what they're experiencing because I've been there. And so I can work with them to achieve that moment that they're trying to get. Um, or if there's something that they're not clear on in terms of how uh, this should be interpreted or how this should be performed. Um, because I've had experience in front of the camera doing the same thing. Yes, it's easier to communicate with them using, their language and understanding what they are going through already. So it does make it easier.
What was it like to move from that short story format of telling a narrative to then a more extensive narrative?
Well, the trick about short stories is that you have to write them and tell them in a very short period of time. So that arc is very short. You've got to get that beginning, middle, and end in a very short period of time, and that's kind of tricky to do as far as that format. To expand it to a feature film, what it comes down to is simply a lot more work. It's just a much bigger chunk of material, and the arc is going to be much longer. So it's just a matter of the size and scale of doing basically the same thing because the process is the same. You're telling the story in a visual format. You've got to shoot it. You've got to do the post production on it and clean it up and make it happen. With a feature film, all of that's going to take longer, longer to prepare, longer to shoot, and longer to do the post on.
Mhm, mhm. Uh, you talked about the actor relationship side of directing, but I'm curious about anything that you'd like to say of the process of that interpretation of directing, of seeing what's on the page and then taking it to the screen.
Yeah, it many times. So a lot of the material that I'm working with is written by somebody else.
Mhm,
So in that process, you may have to negotiate certain elements of the script and certain points and certain things that are in the script with the producers because they may want to see this, but filming it may not be practical. It may not be logistically practical. It may not be mechanically practical. So sometimes you have to, negotiate with them and give and take with them on certain elements of the script that they want to see on the screen. And I have to explain to them, well, that's, either it's going to cost you a heck of a lot more money, or it's not going to happen the way you want it to happen. Um, there are different ways that I can use post production elements to tell the story. What's written. I did a piece recently that required a giant dust storm to come rolling in on this farm in the 1920s. And we shot the plates for it all and everything on location, but I had to have somebody work on the CGI to create the dust storm. And the person I had, it was problematic for them to get something that I could really use that I really liked. And so I just ended up using, in that case, stock footage to use that shot. That I found a piece that was perfect, and it looked like our location. So I used that. So, but I told the producers ahead of time. I said, "Well, it's going to be kind of, this might be tricky to try to get done a certain way, especially if we show the people, the actual actors, in the middle of the dust storm. And how are we going to be able to do this and pull it off so that it's believable?" And I did it in a sort of stylized way. I didn't do it in a literal way. It was more stylized. I did something different with the dialogue that the actors had to say during the dust storm while they're caught inside. I know I stretched the dialogue out. I put a certain sound effect on it to make it sound, you know, um, kind of mangled, like as if it was what you see on the screen with them fighting the dust is also fighting their voices as well, so that you can, they're all distorted and stretched out and has an effects on them. So some of the things every once in a while, the writers or producer, in some cases, they're both the same person, are going to want certain things, and sometimes they're practical, and sometimes they're not, or they're more expensive, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes we just don't have access to A, B, or C. So we've got to go to plan D, to get this shot to work, just to tell the story. Or sometimes we just don't shoot it and we do something different. So that's what typically comes down to uh, the difference in terms of taking this written word and putting it on the screen and making it believable to the audience, or making it practical for us from a production standpoint to actually put it on film, because it is a mechanical process of shooting. It's not, it is a mechanical process from shooting and also from doing the post production afterwards.
Interesting, interesting. Um, In telling stories, is there a particular kind of story, character, or arc that you're most attracted to?
Not really. I mean, there's certain genres that I've already been working in that I really enjoyed working in. There are other stories from a directing standpoint that I've turned down a couple here and there. One in particular was about an Italian mob sort of family in
Hmm.
Staten Island, in New York, and I was offered an opportunity to direct it, or asked if I would be interested in directing this thing. Looking at the script, I was thinking I don't have the cultural background or sensitivity for this. I don't understand anything about any of that, um,
Hmm.
and nor the location. None of that stuff, and all of that would be culturally relevant if I was to take on a project and try to interpret the story, which is mostly a people story. It's not special effects and all kinds of craziness. It's a people story, contemporary, takes place now. And for me to shoot that and give it, filmically interpret the script and get it on the screen, I'd have to have more of a background, an understanding, a sensibility, a cultural familiarity in order to get
Hmm.
this to work. I just didn't feel like I could tackle that um, uh, adequately and professionally and reliably, as opposed to, for example, somebody brought me a piece that's shot in the Middle Ages, took place in medieval times, and that story I could deal with because it was a period piece. So all I had to know was, what the period was, and to relate to understand and study what that period was all about, and then take the script and story and put it. And the setting was the Middle Ages, but the conflict was universal. So that was not a problem. It was not a cultural thing. It was about the conflict that was involved. It was about the adversary. It was about the head to head between the supernatural force and the people. And that I could understand. That I could put together. And shooting it with the costumes and all the stuff that's going on, excellent. It all came off together. So that, or science fiction, a 1950s period piece I did recently, same thing. I could understand the issues are universal. The storytelling was universal. It could take place in any culture, and so it was easily interpreted. The only thing that's different is how we dress the sets and how we dress the actors, how we do the hair and makeup, so that the period looks like it does. But the issues that are being dealt with were not specifically cultural. Um,
Hmm.
Anyone could relate to them. It could take place anytime. And so that's the difference between that and wanting and some being asked to direct a project that was very culturally specific. If you wanted me to shoot a movie about, you know, the you know the Aborigines in Australia, I'd have to, that would be a stretch for me because I don't know anything. I'd have to study from scratch to know, understand, or know anything about the culture or anything else, and it just wouldn't make sense for me to do that, as opposed to somebody who's from that culture to be able to do it.
No, you are probably, I think, one of the first people that's been on the show that's talked about those kind of limitations in storytelling. So, sounds like having a good sense of the kind of stories that you're drawn to is really important in the process creatively as well.
Yeah, it's themes because, again, if the theme is universal, it can take place in the future or it can take place in the past or the present, doesn't
Hmm.
matter. If the themes, the conflicts, the issues that are being brought up, the human conflicts and human struggles and human issues can be played anytime. All the rest of it is window dressing. It's just where it takes place and what props are seen, what sets are seen, what costumes are being worn. That's all mechanical stuff. That's not what's important. What's important is if it is a culturally relevant story where culture is very, very important. It really helps to have, at least for me, to have a background that I'm familiar with in that regard, to be able to tell the story. Um, I wasn't raised in the inner city, streets and ghettos. I was not raised in that environment as an African American. So I don't have that to call on. I have an understanding of that being African American. I have an understanding of what that like, or where it, how it came about, and all the things that led up to it, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't, if you got somebody from the streets to shoot a project that takes place and is about the streets, and the issues of living in the streets in those neighborhoods, I would not, they would have a better shot at it than I would. It's culturally relevant to them because they have the cultural background that is very specific to that type of setting. So, if the settings are if the settings if the themes are universals, the issues may not be that much of a factor, and they haven't been for me so far. I've shot a myriad of different types of projects, and most of them have not been an issue.
Where would you like to go next in your creating? I know that you have a project that is on the way.
Yes, I would like to get into. I mean, the project that I'm working on right now is also historic. It has an ancient history sort of background to it, which I love, ancient history.
Hmm.
So it has an ancient history sort of twist or background to it, elements in it, and yet it takes place today. And and the conflict in that story is universal. I mean, it's the conflict of the main characters is universal. So that could take place anytime. But the elements of it and the background of these characters are based in ancient mythology. So I'd love to get my hands on that. And it's also I want to say a supernatural thriller, which I love as well.
Nice, nice. Where can we go to find more information about that project
Well,
and anything else you're working on?
that project in particular is not out yet. We're just in the very early stages of development. So that's going to take a long time before I can actually talk about what it is and what's going to happen. The project that I'm
Hmm.
on right now is a series project. It's a comedy, a romantic comedy called 12 Sided Die. And that is about a very close-knit group of friends who play Dungeons and Dragons types games. They're heavily into them. And it's about their relationships with each other and also the main two characters, their particular relationship, which is a romantic one. It's very funny. It's very cute, very fast paced. Season two, I shot the entire second season, which is in post right now. It's almost finished, and they're going to be launching a Kickstarter May 1st. And I'm going to post all of that on my Facebook page and my website as well.
And I will, of course, be glad to link that into this show and this video as well for you. Uh, Curious about you're moving from romantic comedy to ancient storytelling. So I love the range there as well, and finding what's human in both.
Yes, I've shot one other feature before this, which was a sort of a romantic comedy. It was sort of a light comedy based on sort of the music business. So I shot that a while back, and I did work on another comedy called Bloomers, which was a web series, which was also sort of a raucous rom-com,
Mhm.
um, and and dramedy sort of thing. And I did a whole 2.5 to 3 seasons of that as well. And I do mean raucous, kind of blue. It works blue in some areas, but it's pretty cool. It's very contemporary. And that genre of shooting comedy is a very specific genre. Um, it takes a little extra to get that on the screen because of the comedic elements. There's so many ways that you can play these things. There's so many ways in which it can be performed. There's so many levels of that, whether you want something subtle or whether you want something overt, over the top, whether you want something that's physical, whether you want something that's just an expression or just a line of dialogue. So there's this big wide parameter that you can shoot within for comedy to try to get this or that to make it as funny as possible. Is it a gag? Is it a physical gag? Can we make the physical gag this way? Is it a look? Is it an expression? It is a beat, editorially. How can we make it funny when you get it all shot? You got to cut it together. How do you make that even funnier editorially? There's all these tricks and elements to shooting comedy, which are very different than shooting narrative drama. So I've had at least three projects where I was working on working in this comedy field to tell the stories. And it's, I think, a bit more of a challenge than shooting the straight drama. It really is.
Yeah, yeah. As they say, comedy is hard, so it sounds like that bears
Yes,
out.
yes, it does. Absolutely bears that.
Many thanks for bringing romance to the world of tabletop gaming as well.
Yes, well, yeah, I was completely unfamiliar with tabletop gaming of any kind. I've never really done it other than, Monopoly or something growing up. So the role-playing games in particular, that's what this is based in. I don't know anything about. So I had to learn about all of that while I was in the process of shooting. And the producer was very good. The writer producer put it together. He wrote it so that it was easy to understand, and I was able to get into it. And we were able, the actors and the players. This was their second season, so I didn't direct the first season. This is their second season, so they already knew, you know, the characters really well, and they know the game really well, and they all play the game. They actually know how to play the game. So all I had to do was capture it. I didn't have to, instruct them on anything or coach them on anything about how to play the game. My notes would have been very subtle. These guys were pros and they were experienced and they've been playing these characters already. So it was very easy for me to walk in and just roll on this thing and worry about getting the technical elements of it all together. Very rarely that I have to, deal with a beat that an actor was playing or not playing or whatever, or take time, ask them to take a little longer on that, or can you pick up the pace on this, or don't react right here or there. And even some of that comes into post production in the editing because the editing process is immensely important. You don't have anything without editing, so you sit down with somebody and all this footage that you shot has to be put together into a story. And that comes down to, in some cases, just adjusting frames, just frames of film, not even a shot, but just the frames. Um, so to get the timing of something just right, a millisecond or a half a second, just down to that. That's how precise that editing and cutting comes down to. And that's the back half of the directing process is getting what you shot put together into a story. And that's been done since film started, since it began in the early
Mhm.
1900s. That process has not changed. The method by which it's done has changed, the technical aspect of it, but mostly it's not. It's still the same. Editing still the same that tells the story. I use the example 1917, the feature film. It looks like it's all shot in one shot. It's not
Mhm.
all shot in one shot. That's done technically by stitching. But the concept of the storytelling makes it appear as though it took place all at one time, that you never left these people, you're always with them the entire time. That's what they wanted to send. But that was all done technically. So the technical aspects of storytelling now are just phenomenal. Plus, you have AI, which can recreate human beings and their faces and whatever age you want them to be at this point. So now we're getting into a realm that's even another level above what you're actually filming. Now, half of what you might see in a movie is going to be done by computer, not actual actors. So, so the storytelling is completely changing, and I don't know how far it's going to go, but it's going to keep going, in the direction it's going right now. So the potential for being able to say and show anything on the screen is pretty much with us right now.
Yeah. Very exciting times and always updating times as well.
Yeah. Yes, always updating times. The only other issue I have generally with storytelling is the storytelling, is the written word and what the story is and how the story is put together. So the only thing I generally run into with the producers and writers is, they have to learn how to kill puppies, as we say, because you have to
Mhm.
take out things in the stories that don't work. And sometimes I have to go over that with them because they may not be that experienced in writing. And, I have to point out there's a huge hole here in your story, that people are going to notice. And you don't want people to be distracted by things that don't need to be there. You've got scenes that don't have anything to do with the story. They have nothing to do with the characters and the characters' objectives. And so you can pull that block out of the pyramid and it still stays up. And that's generally what I run into more often than with shooting projects is that content of that written word um, that I have to interpret on film. And this particular part of it doesn't really work from a storytelling standpoint because it's very, very hard. And there are very, very few people who can actually write it well. Everybody else wants to write it, everybody else thinks they can write it. But in fact, that's just not the case. So, not only grown up with movies since I was, a toddler, I've been involved in this business for over almost 40 years. So I know I've seen that many scripts. I've worked on that many scripts. I've shot them. I've acted them. So I know when I read a script, I can tell, in the first 20 pages whether this thing's going to walk or whether it's going to do anything else. And
Mhm.
if it's not making any sense, or the third act, which is usually the third act, just falls apart, it's got to be fixed. It's got to be changed. It's got to be edited. It's got to be rewritten. And the biggest difficulty I have is just making sure that the stories are shootable. I use the word shootable. Like if they're not shootable, it's because they're just in a terrible state. And half the time, those things never see the light of day. Most of the times, they're not going to use me as a director because the issues with the story. I just can't you can't run on this stuff because it's just horrible. You're going to be there with a piece of material that's just not very good. And I've had to shoot a couple of them. I shot some turkeys. I call them turkeys that just didn't have. They just weren't that good. They just didn't have. They might have mechanically been, the beats, and they showed the beats of the story and the arc and whatever, but it just wasn't interesting. It just doesn't have anything that makes it into that level of feature film. You know,
Mhm.
it's they just there's just not enough there to make it uh, worthy of that status of feature film. It's not going to be engaging enough. It's not going to be different and unusual enough. It's not going to have an edge or a twist or a something that gives it that quality to draw the audience in and hold on to them for that 3 acts.
Mhm. I love that it comes back to that architecture of the written word and essentially what we know about how a good story works. I love that.
Yeah, because a novel, in comparison, you're writing a novel. Typically, you take a long time
Mhm.
get through a novel. And if you're smart, you have an editor that looks at what you've written. And what's that editor going to do? They're going to tell you what's working and what ain't working. They are the third eye, which is what you need, is that third eye, the objective eye. The eye of somebody who's read so many stories and had to go over and edit so many stories. So that writer
Mhm.
may be writing from the heart. They're writing what they feel, what they're so engaged with. But as part of the story, it may not be working. It may not work in that format, it has to be changed just the way it's written, or it may not work at all and have to be cut. But the writers are going to take a lot more time with those novels than perhaps maybe a screenwriter. Um, and adapting, and when you adapt those novels, you've got to figure out how to get this book that's a pretty good size into a 3 act screenplay. So a lot of stuff in that book's just not going to be there. Now you're really getting down to how do we tell this story, reinterpret this story in a screenplay visual fashion from a book. But novel writers have to go to an editor for the editing. They still get a third eye, and the third eye tells them, yeah, that's not going to work, or it doesn't make sense that character A does this particular action. Doesn't make sense that character B says this to someone else and reacts the way they do. And all that does when it happens is take you right out of the story. Takes you out of the story. You see the romantic story, the two lovers or whatever, and one of them does this or one of them does that, and it's like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding? There's no way that that person is going to do this or that. I've seen a few of them. I know you have as well. You sit there and you're completely taken out of the story. You spend the next 10 minutes just shaking your head because That's just not believable. The action is not believable. Uh, it just doesn't work. And boy, I have a couple of my favorites that are just, whew, man, never forget them because they were that bad. And those were big, big people behind them and big money and just ridiculous, unbelievable is what they were. So yeah, written word. Nothing is done without the written word. I encourage these people, the producers, I tell them, go out and get a professional writer to write your story. Oh, they never want to do it. Right? Geez, that's the first thing I tell them. I said, go out and get a writer to write your story. Pay them or promise them, do whatever you got to do. But get somebody who's either made a living at it, preferably made a living at it at some point in time, who has a track record of writing and producing projects that have been done and are out there that you can actually watch,
Mhm.
so that you've got the best version of your story that can be told. Otherwise you're busy trying to do it yourself. You just don't know. It's in the DNA of people who write. DNA. I can't do. I'm not going to write long form. I'm not going to write a whole script. There's no way in hell I'm going to do all that. I'll work with them on the story. I may do some minor rewriting when it's done, just to shorten a scene or lengthen it or do whatever. Little stuff like that, but I'm not writing that thing from scratch. That takes somebody who knows how to do that. They got the DNA to do it, yeah, and the experience.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and thereby you get to save the reshoots and the rewrites and the revisions.
exactly. You're still going to have versions of the script, multiple versions of that screenplay. You're going to have 6, 7, 8, 10, 12. You're going to have a whole bunch of versions of it. That's just going to happen. What is it? Hemingway said the first draft of anything is shit. And he's right.
Hmm.
It's going to be rewritten, rewritten, rewritten again, and rewritten again. So to get it just right, to tweak it. And every aspect of shooting and post production is the same way, over and over and over again. Oh, try this. No, let's try that. Let's try this. Try that. It is the most cumbersome, meticulous, tedious process on this earth, I can tell you.
Yeah,
Just, yeah, yeah, I guess it could be akin to, trying to learn how to cook a meal, a particular meal that you've put together or something that you come up with and invent. I guess you have to do that more than once, a little less flour here, a little more sugar there, a little something over here. You got to work on it until it gets a prototype for a widget that you're designing in your garage. You're going to have several versions of that prototype. It's just until you get it the way it needs to be. Yeah. Process. Yes. Process.
love the emphasis on process. I love your knowledge of stories and how they work. Anything that we've missed in terms of places where people can connect or things they might be on the lookout for?
Well, my Facebook page, which is under my name, Tim Russ, my picture is on there. There is not another Facebook page like that one.
Mhm.
I post my projects on there when they're ready to be looked at and viewed. Also, my website, which is timrusswebpage.com. You Google my name and it's going to come up. And I post on the projects I have on there, as well as, my appearances for music and conventions and things like that. So, but Facebook, definitely, I put it on there, and I'll post them on my website as well, and Twitter and Instagram. And again, you just type my name in; it's gonna come up. You'll find me. It's not hard. There's only one of me. So,
Yeah.
um, and I'll post everything on there as well. 12-sided die, which is the one I just talked about earlier. I will be posting that material today, a little bit later today, on all of those platforms. So people will be able to follow those. It's a cute story, very good actors, very good talent, and really good writing. So, and it's a very quick pace, nice fast pace, and some good laughs and things. So it's very funny. I look forward to seeing that when it's released, and it usually gets on a couple, three different platforms. We'll see which ones they are this time. But that's it. So Facebook page, Tim Russ, Instagram, Twitter, and my webpage. I'll have it all there.